You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 9th of September 2013. Boris Johnson plans to introduce London visa. Waqar Hussain cleared of child sex grooming charges. Journalists reject Chris Huhne's speeding story was payback. France unveils secular charter for all schools. Germany set for 200 billion trade surplus. German converts to Islam ethnically cleansing Christians in Syria. Kerry says bigger risk not taking action while Saudis will pay for war. Assad denies ordering chemical attack and warns of retaliation. Al-Qaeda militants butcher 24 civilians near Ras Al Ain in Syria. Thought for the day, where lies the truth? And finally, a penny, a pfennig or a euro? Now, I'm about to say something which will probably offend someone, and frankly I, like Rhett Butler, don't give a damn. Why is it that the term nationalist seems to invoke very odd feelings in the person who adopts this ideology? Once a nationalist, you must apparently adhere to some very strict rulings. You might be a neo-Nazi or anti-Semitic. You could also be a pro-Arab and yet loathe all people of colour. Now also we have the reverse nationalists, bless them, who are pro-Semitic, pro-colour and anti-Muslim, all opposing sides of a coin. Most of us know fellow members with at least one of these callings. Fair enough. But the term nationalism means leaving behind these labels and putting your own country and people first. Being a nationalist doesn't leave room for other countries, religions or peoples, and to be fair, no one else gives a jot about us UK nationalists anyway. It's up to us to remember our title and our ethos. Nationalism in its purest form, none malignant, none toxic, and ours, all ours. It won't be until many of our members and activists remember to be nationalists and stop throwing toys out of prams that true nationalism will emerge from the well-used computers in this country. It's never too late to remember why we're here. UK news. Boris Johnson plans to introduce London visa. Boris Johnson has called for the introduction of a new London visa to allow talented tech experts and fashion designers to get jobs in the capital. The plan, which has been submitted to the Home Office, would see the best applicants being given an official endorsement that would speed their entry and help them bypass the often lengthy process of the current visa system. London Mayor Mr Johnson said the idea was about attracting the best and brightest to London. Mr Johnson told the Financial Times, "It's a clear message to the elite of Silicon Valley or the fashionistas of Beijing that London is the place they should come to develop ideas, build new businesses and be part of an epicentre for global talent." Under the plan proposed by Mr Johnson, London would receive a yearly allocation of 100 of the government's 1,000 existing exceptional talent visas. These are generally given out to those at the top of their field in areas such as science and the arts. World at 8 comments, "I presume the Loris is talking about bringing in yet more foreigners to our capital city. Surely we have enough of our own best and brightest to offer jobs to and provide benefits to our country. Or is this the answer to our so-called education system that now favours the migrants over our own, thus the reduction in an educated English section of society? If so, proof and pudding spring to mind. Put this money into educating our own Loris, not the rest of the world." Waqar Hussain cleared of child sex grooming charges. A 25-year-old man has been cleared by a jury of grooming a child and committing sexual offences against her. Waqar Hussain from Kingsway, Luton, has denied charges of meeting a child after sexually grooming and 2 counts of sexual activity with a child. He was charged following a complaint by the mother of a 14-year-old girl in High Wycombe that her daughter had been contacted via a social networking site. Mr Hussain was acquitted by a jury at Oxford Crown Court. World at 8 states, "This is the shape of things to come." Journalists reject Chris Huhne's speeding story was payback. Former MP Chris Huhne, who was jailed for lying about a driving offence, has claimed the newspaper investigation which led to his downfall was payback for his stance towards Rupert Murdoch. He told the BBC it was no coincidence that the story appeared in the Sunday Times after he had called for police to reopen its phone hacking probe. While accepting he was fair game, he spoke of an agenda behind the story. The disgraced former cabinet minister used the first instalment of a new weekly column in The Guardian to suggest a conspiracy in the Murdoch-owned press was behind his downfall. Hoon said in his Guardian piece, "My endgame began when Neville Thurlbeck, the chief reporter of the now defunct News of the World, heard gossip that I was having an affair. Rather than cheapskating on the proposed investigation by hacking my phone, the News of the World put me under extensive surveillance by a retired policeman, a more expensive exercise." Writing on Twitter, Thurlbeck said, "Not a Murdoch press target, a Neville Thurlbeck target. My source, my story, and it took a year to persuade the editor to run it. The Murdoch press thought Hoon was such a political minnow they didn't want to run it. End of conspiracy theory." World at 8 says, "The whole thing stinks. As people, we in the UK ignite conspiracy theories and the media run them, but when the media themselves are involved, there are the usual sin-eaters and denials. The whole police involvement in this was suspect. If Hoon had been a Muslim or a black MP, he'd have got away with everything." European news. France unveils secular charter for all schools. France's education minister finally unveiled his much talked about secularism charter on Monday morning. Education minister Vincent Payon said his new secular charter, which was revealed on Monday after 10 a.m, is designed to promote absolute respect for freedom of conscience. The document is to appear in a prominent place in every school and remind teachers and pupils of a list of secular republican principles. The document itself contains a number of broad philosophical principles that have already provoked a backlash. Article 9 states, "Secularism implies the rejection of all violence and all discrimination, guarantees equality between girls and boys, and rests on a culture of respect and understanding of the other." While the Charter allows for pupils' free expression, Article number 11 states that staff have a duty of strict neutrality. They must not show their political or religious convictions in the exercise of their duties. Article 11 emphasises the famous French Enlightenment values of scientific inquiry and appears to prevent any possible disputes over evolution or sex education. Lessons are secular, no subject is a priori excluded from scientific and pedagogic questioning. No student can invoke their political or religious convictions in order to dispute a teacher's right to address a question on the syllabus. Of course, the Charter affirms France's 2004 law, which banned the wearing of all ostentatious religious symbols, and Article 13 appears to emphasise the point, perhaps as regards activities like sports and athletics. Nobody can avail of their religious affiliation in order to refuse to obey rules applicable in our schools. World at 8 states, "By banning all religious affiliations, this includes Islam, but also precludes the religion of France, which I believe is Roman Catholicism. This aids the Muslims and the communist regime of France at the same time. Very République." Germany set for €200 billion trade surplus. Germany is on course for a record trade surplus of €200 billion this year, but its export success threatens to surpass the threshold set by the European Union. Munich's IFO Institute for Economic Research announced on Thursday that 2013 is set to be a record year for Germany with the trade surplus. The difference between exports and imports expected to hit the €200 billion mark thanks to an upturn in global trade. European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi tempered hopes that the Eurozone was about to rebound strongly, insisting that the nascent recovery remained extremely fragile. "I am very, very cautious about recovery. I can't share the enthusiasm," he said. He added that the central bank stands ready to act should the situation suddenly deteriorate again in the face of, for example, geopolitical risks related to the situation in Syria. German converts to Islam ethnically cleansing Christians in Syria. The Nazis are back. They just had to stop by a mosque and convert to Islam first. German Islamists participated in the murders of Syrian Christians in an early August attack on the Turkish-Syrian border, according to a report in the German magazine Focus. The magazine reported last week the involvement of nearly 100 fanatical German Muslims, including Germans who had converted to Islam, in the Syrian civil war. A German police official told the magazine that the complicity of Germans in the extermination and ethnic cleansing in Syria is a sheer and intolerable condition. Prosecutors are examining whether the German Muslims can be charged with participation in a terrorist organisation. Former gangster rapper from Berlin Dennis Cuthbert, aka Dezo Dog, is believed to be fighting with the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Nusra Front. German counter-terrorism officials view Cuthbert as a powerful recruitment tool. He made a video before his departure to Syria, urging Muslims to join the jihad in that country. Deso Dog, whom Front Page has written about in the past, is the product of an African father and a German mother, whose stepfather was a US soldier stationed in Germany who eventually converted to Islam. And Dog's plans for Islamic terror extend far beyond Syria. You are not going to live in safety. You employ millions and billions for the war against Islam, and that's why this country is here. The Federal Republic of Germany is a war zone. Clearly this is a problem that can only be solved with more Muslim immigrants. World at 8 comments, now I bet that most of these converts are not the tall, blonde Aryan nation types. They're probably the reject offspring of blacks and Arabs. Rather like that so-called German doctor who killed patients in the UK. The press lauded the German bit, but he was in fact a black African. Syria, like Nigeria, is attracting the dross of the universe. Time for a God-related enema. World news. Kerry says bigger risk not taking action, whilst Saudis we will pay for war. US Secretary of State John Kerry has warned that not responding to the alleged use of chemical weapons by Syrian forces would be riskier than taking action. He was speaking in London before returning to the US to urge Congress to back launching military strikes. Russia has appealed to Washington to focus instead on peace talks. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has insisted there is no evidence his government used chemical weapons. The US accused Mr Assad's forces of killing 1,429 people in a sarin gas attack on the 21st of August on the outskirts of the capital Damascus. Wrapping up a tour of European capitals, Mr Kerry said if there was to be no response to the attack, then Damascus would think it could intimidate anybody. I don't believe that we should shy from this moment. The risk of not acting is greater than the risk of acting, he said. Kerry on Sunday went on that Saudi Arabia will support military intervention in Syria by the United States and its partners. They have supported the strike and they support taking action, Kerry said after a long meeting of Arab League ministers originally called in to discuss the Mideast Peace Initiative. They believe that it's very important to do that. World at 8 states. There is no use relying on the Arab League as they are as bent as Clinton's What's-It. While sarin may have been used, it was supplied by the US or the UK or France or all three to the so-called rebels. There is no concrete evidence it was used by the Assad regime at all, and I would not accept word of mouth from any of these politicians. They are all complicit liars. Assad denies ordering chemical attack and warns of retaliation. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has denied ordering an alleged chemical weapons attack said to have killed hundreds of civilians in the Damascus countryside on August the 21st. He also warned the US military operations designed to degrade his forces could change the course of war in favour of rebels and radical jihadis, causing regional chaos, and that his allies would retaliate. Dr Assad's government has blamed the attacks on rebels seeking to draw in the US and its Western allies at a time when the military has gone over to the offensive. His denial coincided with yesterday's report in Germany's Bild am Sonntag saying that he repeatedly refused to authorise the deployment of such weapons, quoting German intelligence sources who said commanders had been requesting authorisation for more than 4 months. Al-Qaeda militants killed 24 civilians near Ras al-Ain. Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorist groups operating in Syria, including the Al-Nusra Front, are trying to capture Kurdish territories and make them part of a state they want to create in the region. Al-Qaeda linked terrorists in Syria have beheaded all 24 Syrian passengers travelling from Tartus to Ras al-Ain in the northeast of Syria, among them a mother and her baby. Gunmen from the terrorist Islamic State of Iraq and Levant stopped the bus on the road to Talkalak and killed everyone before setting the bus on fire. According to media reports, the attack was carried out because the passengers, who were from 3 different villages in Ras al-Ain, supported anti-terrorist Kurdish groups which were formed recently to defend Kurdish population against anti-Syria terrorists. Among the dead were the bodies of a mother and her 40-days-old infant, which were recognised by their relatives. Syrian Kurdish leader Salah Muslim warned on Friday that the Kurd minority is facing an ethnic cleansing by Al-Qaeda terrorists. World at 8 states. This is what the world focused on with Saddam, his use of gas exterminating his Kurdish population. But the West, UN, NATO and all will keep quiet about the Syrian Kurds and their extinction by the UN-backed rebels because that particular platform isn't useful to them in toppling President Assad. President Assad was elected by the people and has been in office many years. We really should have learnt our lesson many years ago on interfering outside our country. Thought for the day: wherein lies the truth? Now, I've made my way through a Sunday paper and I'm really wondering if these journalists and editors or whatever actually read through these articles, or are they all gone through by the governmental panel before being printed? They all read the same and most are very spare with the truth. We have UK sent poison gas to Assad whilst completely ignoring the fact that the West and the US have been supplying the Islamic rebels with much of the same, as have the French, and the same arms suppliers supplied Libya and Egypt, whilst it is well known the only company to make any money out of and lose no lives in Iraq was a large US based corporation who no doubt are heavily involved in the would-be rebuilding of Syria with all that entails. Lovely jubbly for some. Looking at the way the MOD lost £1.5 billion of our money when they had the nerve to dumb down our armed forces and promote territorials who have normal outside jobs is beyond me. We need to pay more attention to our government than the other governments of the world, don't we? Looking at this, an untrained chimp, bless him, could do better and get paid in more than peanuts. Other thought, please listening. Then we head for true nausea. Sam the Cam in tears over innocence like something out of the sodding Bible. I almost threw up over it. Refugee camps are terrible places, but you have to ask yourself, why are there refugee camps in the Middle East? Because Islam is sectarian and warlike, and in the days of yore all these poor people would have been dead, and the poor little mites as well. Many are fleeing the rebels' newfound democracy, and many just fleeing the carnage. And the wealthy Kuwaitis and Saudis could assimilate all these people with their oil money spent on lavish, stupid, overdone palaces. So don't give me the lie that Islam is the home of charity for even all the Muslims. It ain't. And as for those fleeing the gas attacks, they're from rebel strongholds which operate from within these private houses. So it is civil war at its worst, but left alone it will burn out. Interfered with and it could cause a conflagration more than we realise. Stop touring refugee camps, Sam, and do some touring of the UK and the trouble spots here. I had to laugh over the BBC report that if your age exceeds your bra size you're finished, because it's right. One of the reasons I don't do video is because I am in that category. Men want to look at attractive young women, and I am deliberately leaving out the bunch of Asian reporters we get on ITV, truly worthy of a burqa. But it's always been so. Men of any age, whether they be prepubescent and spotty to the old fat balding guy, still see themselves as babe magnets. And let's face it, for one thing, a man on his own can always get something in the female line on his arm, but a woman of the same age or even a bit younger can't. It's just a fact of life. As we women age, our thinking process leaves our nether regions and goes up to the brain. As men age, their thinking process leaves their brains and goes down to their nether regions. Fact. It's the fact of the Western world that the older woman is so indoctrinated by 50 Shades of whatever, or the beauty industry telling her that she deserves it, that she forgets she's a money market for all these industries, which in fact bear no resemblance to normality at all. If all the geriatrics around were frolicking in public and getting ASBOs for indecency, it would be a point of public ridicule, and we would all be killed by the sword of Damocles in this double-edged scenario. Older women remind men of their wives and mothers, figures of authority, and men hate female authority unless they pay for it. Young women, however unattractive they may be, have youth on their side. Men love youth. It reminds them they were once young, and poor things, they deserve it, don't they? The final summary today got me really going, and I'm afraid I nearly tore the paper up, so upset was I. It was our Liz Jones again, and I don't know why, but she has taken over the Mail big time. She can be really funny and is to some extent on the ball. No, but get her on Indians and India and she could bore for that country. She is a multicultural nightmare and a liberal, but I can understand why in her case. I may be barking up the wrong tree, but on viewing her family pictures, it looks as though several of the Jones family dropped in via Bombay or Calcutta, because having married into an Anglo-Indian family in my youth, I can usually spot them at 60 paces. Not for any ulterior or racial abuse purposes, but sheer interest and memories. Of course, like many who have Anglo-Indian blood, and there are a multitude of very famous British actors, singers, etc. who do, all deny it. One very famous singer who went to school with my first husband in Calcutta always refers to "we Europeans in India," which curls me up laughing. My first husband was sent home at 8 to a public school in England to avoid the sing-song accent so redolent amongst them. But as they're usually a good-looking bunch of people, I don't understand the reticence to actually be proud of what they are. And I hope that Jones is not one of the ashamed brigade, which could account for some of her oddness. However, she did a bit on the Diana film and her Muslim doctor. Jones admits she fell in love with the actor some years ago and went on to marry a Sikh, which of course failed, but it could also be her trying to get back to her roots. Her point was that nowadays, with the mixed races couples brigade, all Asian males have white women and all Asian females have white guys on TV. The one thing that got me angry was that Jones truly believes that her ex-Sikh husband was getting his back on her for the, wait for it, Great Victorian Holocaust of millions of Indians and partition. Excuse me? Are we talking about the Indian Mutiny, in which thousands of Europeans died and we had the Black Hole of Calcutta? I'd take a bet that it was the Muslim element that caused that, with their bloody cartridges supposedly covered in pig grease, mainly because the Hindus are usually too bloody lazy to do anything other than sit on their backsides. The Sikhs had a bad time in partition because of the Muslims, not the British. It's just that we didn't do a good job of controlling Islam then, never mind doing it now. But to the uninitiated, Jones is referring, I hope, to the Great Famines that occurred throughout the world, not just India, during the time of what is called the Victorian Holocausts. And I quote a small text. Davis explicitly places his historical reconstruction of these catastrophes in traditional inaugurated by Rosa Luxemburg in The Accumulation of Capital, where she sought to expose the dependence of the economic mechanisms of capitalist expansion on the infliction of permanent violence on the South. Davis argues for examples that between 1875 and 1900, a period that included the worst famines in English history, annual grain exports increased from 3 to 10 million tonnes, equivalent to the annual nutrition of 25 million people. Indeed, by the turn of the century, India was supplying nearly a fifth of Britain's wheat consumption at the cost of its own food security. In addition, already saddled with a huge public debt that included reimbursing the stockholders of the East India Company and paying the costs of the 1857 revolt, India also had to finance British military supremacy in Asia. In addition to incessant proxy warfare with Russia on the Afghan frontier, the subcontinent's masses also subsidised such far-flung adventures of the Indian Army as the occupation of Egypt, the invasion of Ethiopia and the conquest of the Sudan. As a result, military expenditures never comprised less than 25%, 34% including police, of India's annual budget. As an example of the effects of both this and the restructuring of the local economy to suit imperial needs, in Victoria Berar an acreage of cotton doubled in 1875-1900. Davis notes that during the famine of 1899 to 1900, when 143,000 Belarusians died directly from starvation, the province exported not only thousands of bales of cotton but an incredible 747,000 bushels of grain. So not just India but a much wider area was involved in these terrible famines, and China had it amongst the worst. So no, Jones, your ex was staying true to his culture, that of not being able to relate to a Western style marriage, but saying that if we Brits were so ghastly, why the hell have all the people we were so awful to decided to come over here? At least the British left their ex-colonies. Wish we could do the same to their migrants, just pick them up and put them down back home. OK, had my rant. Hope it helped and hope it offended. I like offending. It makes good debate. Wednesdays I'm doing an article on the police in all their glory. And finally, a pfennig or a penny? Now I know this is a bit old, but I thought it had a good Monday funny in a world which has ceased to laugh at itself. It's an EU directive which in some words is shit bypassing the shit ban, if you would excuse my pun. I hope you share my sense of humour. The British penny. EU Directive number 456179. In order to meet the conditions for joining the single European currency, all citizens of the United Kingdom and of Great Britain and Northern Ireland must be made aware that the phrase spending a penny is not to be used after 31st of December 2013. From this date the correct terminology will be euronating. Thank you for your attention. I think we all know where this particular directive can be shoved, don't you? You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.